How to Be Orange, Chapter 16, The Open Street is Closed. The quote, "Then, from behind me, a bicycle slammed into me. I turned and saw a young brunette cyclist in a short skirt. She looked awfully cute. She also looked mighty pissed. At me. She scowled, then muttered, 'Klotsuck,' and sped off." Pete Jordan, author, De Fiets Republiek. I bike. Even in Chicago, I used to bike. If you've ever seen that one madman biking in the middle of a snowstorm, it may have been me. When I came to the Netherlands and saw the standard means of transport here, a part of me felt like I was already home. My first bike in Nederland was a rental. Then I had a loaner. I asked where to go to get my own bike, and at least in Amsterdam, the common answer was, go find a junkie. One night I was accompanied by a friend of mine who, sure enough, had a junkie approach us and ask, "Fiets te koop?" This meant, "Wanna buy a bike?" My friend offered up 50 guilders, and presto, he had a bike. The next night, I found myself wandering the same street on the way home with 50 guilders in my pocket. It was near the red light district that I found a thoroughly disreputable-looking gentleman on a bike saying, "Wanna buy?" I nodded yes, and followed him around the corner into one of the myriad shadowy corners. I looked at the bike. Seemed rather new. I asked how much. He said 25 guilders. This seemed a bit odd, too good to be true. All my instincts were now telling me I was in over my head. If I'd been brought up in New York City, I might have said, "I don't like this," and walked away. But I'm from the Midwest, and I felt it wouldn't have been polite. I held up 25 guilders and asked, "Can I try it first?" Now nervous, the man said, "Yeah, here," and he gave me the bag he was holding so that he could turn the bike around. But to my surprise, once he did that, he hopped on the bike and took off with my 25 guilders. Like an idiot, I followed him saying, "You forgot your bag." A quick examination of the plastic baggie he'd given me proved that I hadn't purchased a bike at all, but instead what looked like crack cocaine. It's possible I'd purchased crack. More likely was I'd encountered an Amsterdam tradition, fake drug dealers. It's one of the more enduring scams in the city, and it's not technically illegal since no one was in possession of any real drugs. It's just some powder made to look like a rock of crack in a baggie. At least that's what I'd thought. At this point, I'd drawn a bit of attention to myself since I was holding up a bag of drugs in the middle of the street. Even in Amsterdam, this can draw attention. One downtrodden guy was looking at me curiously. I said, "Can you believe it? I was trying to buy a bike. Instead, I got a fake bag of drugs." Wide-eyed, the guy said, "Let me see that." The way he cherished the bag, I'd started to think maybe it wasn't fake. It occurred to me to say, "Hey, that'll be 25 guilders, please." But in retrospect, I was happy to get out of there with my syringe virginity. The junkie bike. At one point, everyone I knew had one. My boss even had one, covered in red and yellow tape. Decorative. That's how I learned a valuable lesson about Amsterdam biking etiquette. My colleague had borrowed the fancy taped-up bike from our boss, and together we were riding side by side in the bike lane. At one point, the bike lane merged a bit with the sidewalk, and two pedestrians started shouting at us in Dutch. We weren't sure what we'd done wrong, but one of these guys had lunged at my colleague and started grabbing the bike. It soon became apparent that this pedestrian was, in fact, the one who had meticulously applied the red and yellow tape, since this was his bike, and he had every reason to believe we had actively stolen it. My colleague was trying to explain, "I didn't steal the bike. I'm borrowing the bike from the guy who paid the guy who stole your bike." And after realizing what he had just said, he immediately gave up and gave the bike back. I gave him a lift home. Now we had to explain to our boss what had happened to his bike. He just laughed. Easy come, easy go. Sorry to put you in that situation. That would not be the last awkward situation. Another colleague of mine was caught on camera on the front page of Het Parool newspaper. They were doing an expose on the rampant sale of junky bikes in Amsterdam, and they had a triptych of photos chronicling the sale with the faces blurred. But to anyone who knew him, it was obvious. The man buying this illegal bike was our colleague, Peter G. The location was right next to Boom Chicago. Of course, Boom Chicago was not implicated, though they've sold me more than one illegal bike over the years. I like to think I've paid for my junky bike sins in that I've had so many of my own bikes stolen over the years, although I guess I can't really call it stealing when I leave my keys in the lock like an idiot. There's something indeed very Dutch about bike path logic. Everything functions fine as long as you just know your place. Dutch bicyclists will tolerate a lot. But if pedestrians, like Pete Jordan, wander into the bike path, it's tring tring and klootzak. I find it charming that Amsterdam bicycles can be so optimistic. Surely they must notice that the streets are full of tourists, sometimes of year more than others. Surely they'd anticipate the increased likelihood of a collision based on that season. Nope. All too often, the bike bells ring as if they're genuinely surprised that some group of tourists is impeding their progress. While biking in the Netherlands, it is never okay to judge people on the basis of color, unless they're riding a group of matching colored bicycles. Then you can be sure that they are tourists on rental bikes who are way more dangerous than when they're on foot. They're possibly high, and they probably don't know how to bike. Just the other day, I was almost run over by a group of matching green bikes. They were all blithely biking through a red light as if assuming, green bikes mean green lights. Now, you might expect me to go off on a rant about scooters here, but I'm not falling into that trap. Scooters are a real litmus test to see just how tolerant you are. I'll admit I have flirted with road rage when scooters have raced past me on the bike path. I even yelled at a guy one time, "You're supposed to ride in the street." And he actually stopped and explained to me the rule. Blue number plates mean that your scooter can ride on the bike path. Yellow means that you're supposed to have a helmet and ride in the street. I suppose I was happy that there was a well-thought-out system, never mind that when he'd passed me, there were 3 yellow number plates stuck in traffic, and his blue number plate was whipping past me so fast I'd still felt my teeth rattling. I realize a lot of blue plate scooters are modifying their engines and breaking the rules, which is why I was so thrilled to see the police stop the kid who had raced past me. But mostly, I have no problem sharing the bike path with scooters. Clearly, there are worse things. Specifically, the things that block the path entirely. Sometimes these can be the double-wide chat rooms, people biking next to each other so engrossed in conversation they become unaware that anyone might want to pass them. Even if I'm biking next to someone, I don't mind if I hear a tring-tring or a scooter toot-toot from behind. In fact, anytime I'm biking double-wide, I'm listening for the toot-toot, sometimes so much so that my Dutch conversation partner complains that I'm not giving her my full attention. Sorry, dear. Yes, the Netherlands is a crowded place, and you must be very spatially aware, unless there's a really good chat going on. It's handy to know the rules of the road. Of course, I know the basics from studying for my American driver's license, but that was nothing compared to the Dutch driving exam. As well as the practical exam, I was required to take a theory exam. Why does driving exist? In the theory exam, I got to properly learn all the rules I thought I knew, but many I had learned incorrectly. For example, when leaving a roundabout, it's important to signal clearly, even for bicycles. From biking in the Netherlands, I had learned from example. Yes, you should signal, but not too overtly, because that would be uncool. From experience, I knew that the appropriate way to signal was to look as if you're handicapped and can barely raise your arm. There are, of course, downsides to knowing the rules of the road. I was once doing a gig for a corporate event, leading a walking tour through Amsterdam city center for a bunch of international investors. They'd all been to Amsterdam before. I just had to be entertaining while taking them from Hotel Grand to a gin Jenever bar and a boat tour. I had my clipboard and I was ready to go. But then we came to some road construction. It's hard not to encounter road construction in the Netherlands. Indeed, the Dutch term for road closed is de straat is open. Literally, the street is open. Dutch football guru Johan Cruijff once famously said, "Every disadvantage has its advantage." Johan Cruijff is perhaps also the guru of Dutch road construction. A street is only open when it is closed. Dutch people like ripping up the streets so much, I think sometimes they just do it for fun. Sometimes a street will be perfect for 2 weeks, and then they'll rip it up again for no apparent reason. Perhaps it's just to make work for people. I call them the brick flippers. I've watched as they pull the bricks up from one side of the road and replace them on the other side. This is the code of the brick flippers. Some bricks have been face down for 2 weeks. We must flip them over to the other side. We have to be fair to both sides of the brick. So there I was with my tour group of investors. The already narrow street was made even narrower by the road construction. They looked at me with trepidation, but I guided them. I guided them through as confidently as possible. And then, hallelujah, we came to the zebra crossing. I stood in the zebra crossing and beckoned my group to cross. There were a couple of Spaniards who were clearly nervous about the whole thing, and sure enough, as I was standing there in the crosswalk, I heard the angry ringing of a bike bell coming at me at full speed. I'd expected to see a bunch of tourists, but in fact, it was an older Dutchman. All I could do was swat at him with my clipboard as he whipped by me. I got everyone safely across the bike path, and I realized the Dutchman was right behind me. He was swearing at me in Dutch and English. "You don't have to hit me, huh? I am going my own gang, huh? You don't hit people with your clipboard, huh? You want to fight with me, huh? You want to fight?" Clearly, I could have said sorry and moved on, but I couldn't help it. I said, "I just took the Dutch driving exam, and it's very clear. All wheeled traffic must stop when pedestrians are present in a crosswalk. And by the way, I'm leading a tour of your city and trying to give these people a nice first impression. Right now, you are that impression." I don't know why I thought that would work. Somehow I expected that he would say, "Gosh, you're right, thank you." But instead, we all got to learn the word "meshuka" as he spat at me and took off. I love it that in Amsterdam, you can use your bike for everything. You see moms riding bikes with a rack on the front, holding one kid, a baby on the handlebars, and 2 kids on the back, and a third one standing on top of them for a play date. The family car in Amsterdam is a bike. Helmets? Nah. Do normal. All this I've seen. It's normal. But what I saw for the first time in front of my house, I still cannot believe. It was the dad riding the bike with a kid on the front, and on the back was the mom holding a little baby. Couldn't have been more than 6 months old. And then she took her hand off the papa so that she was just balancing on her butt, and she pulled up her shirt and started breastfeeding. That is the true meaning of multitasking. That is the true meaning of freedom. And that is the moment I knew I had truly arrived.